They said the new hospital CEO was arriving today. A big deal, they said. A man who had turned around 3 failing hospitals and made them profitable. A man who answered to no one. The board was practically trembling with excitement. I was mopping the floor outside the conference room when I heard them all gathering. My mop was old. My back was aching. My hands had calluses so deep they looked like scars. I was 68 years old, and I had been a janitor at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital for 12 years. And they had no idea who I really was. If you're new to Family Dark Blames, subscribe for more unforgettable family betrayal and revenge stories. Like this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, here's what really happened. My name is Arthur Brennan. I'm 68 years old. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but I spent most of my life in Chicago. For the past 12 years, I have been a janitor at St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital in a small but busy town outside of Chicago. I work the night shift mostly. I clean up after everyone. I scrub floors, empty trash cans, mop up spills that no one wants to talk about. It's honest work. It's quiet work. And that's exactly what I needed. But before I was Arthur the janitor, I was Arthur Brennan the surgeon. I was one of the best cardiothoracic surgeons in the Midwest. I had a private practice in Chicago. I had money. I had respect. I had a beautiful wife named Eleanor and 2 children, a son named Derek and a daughter named Melissa. We lived in a big house in Oak Park. We had everything. And then I lost it all. Not because of a medical mistake. Not because of addiction. Not because of a scandal. I lost everything because I trusted the wrong people. My own family. My own son. I was pushing my mop bucket down the hallway when I saw Dr. Harrison, the chief of staff, walking with the board members. They were all dressed in their best suits. They looked nervous. They looked excited. The board chairman, a man named Richard Prescott, was holding a folder and checking his watch. I knew Richard Prescott. He was one of the men who had helped destroy my reputation years ago. He didn't recognize me now. I made sure of that. I had gained weight. My hair had gone completely white, and I wore it long and unkempt. I wore cheap glasses with thick frames. I walked with a slight limp from an old car accident. I spoke with a different accent, a slower, more rural way of talking. No one saw Arthur Brennan the surgeon. They only saw Arthur the janitor. I kept mopping the same spot over and over, pretending to be focused on my work. I wanted to hear what they were saying. Richard Prescott looked at his watch again. He should be here in 10 minutes, he said. Everyone needs to be in the conference room. This is the most important moment this hospital has had in decades. This man is a visionary. He's going to save us. Dr. Harrison nodded, but he looked uncomfortable. I still don't understand, Richard. Why didn't we interview him? Why didn't we meet him before the appointment? He just appeared out of nowhere, and the board approved him without question. Richard Prescott smiled a thin, cold smile. Because he has connections, David. Connections you wouldn't understand. He comes from a family that has owned hospitals for generations. He is the sole heir to the Brennan Medical Group. My heart stopped. I felt my grip tighten on the mop handle. The Brennan Medical Group. That was my family's company. That was the medical empire my father had built from nothing. The empire I was supposed to inherit. The empire my son had stolen from me. The Brennan Medical Group, Dr. Harrison repeated. I thought that company was bought out years ago. I thought the family lost everything. Richard Prescott laughed. That's what everyone thought. But the real story is much more interesting. The real heir has been hiding for over a decade. He's been living quietly, staying out of the public eye. But recently, he resurfaced. He came back with a plan to rebuild. And he chose St. Catherine's as his first project. He could have chosen any hospital in the country, but he chose us. I felt dizzy. I had to lean against the wall. My son, Derek, he was coming here. He was coming to this hospital. The same hospital I had been cleaning floors in for 12 years. The same hospital where no one knew my real name. I had to get to the conference room. I had to see his face. I had to see if he had any idea that I was still alive. I pushed my mop bucket into the supply closet and took off my janitor's vest. Underneath, I was wearing a plain white shirt and old khakis. I wasn't exactly dressed for a board meeting, but I didn't care. I walked toward the conference room, moving as slowly as I could, trying to blend in. No one noticed me. No one ever noticed me. That was the whole point. The conference room had a large glass wall that looked out onto the main lobby. I stood near the vending machines, pretending to read the labels on the candy bars. I could see Richard Prescott and the other board members taking their seats. I could see Dr. Harrison standing awkwardly by the window. And then I saw the doors open and my son walked in. Derek Brennan looked exactly like his mother. He had her dark hair, her sharp cheekbones, her intense blue eyes. He was tall and handsome, and he walked into that room like he owned everything he could see. He was wearing a custom-tailored charcoal suit and leather shoes that probably cost more than I made in a month. He looked healthy. He looked confident. He looked like a man who had never suffered a single day in his life. But I knew better. I knew the truth about Derek. I knew what he had done to me. I knew what he had done to my reputation. I knew what he had done to my marriage. And most of all, I knew what he had done to his mother, Eleanor, before she died. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to when I still had everything. I was 56 years old when my life fell apart. I was at the peak of my career. I had just performed a groundbreaking heart surgery that had been featured in a major medical journal. My practice was thriving. My family was happy, or so I thought. Eleanor was the love of my life. We had been married for 32 years. We had 2 children, Derek, who was 30, and Melissa, who was 28. Derek had gone to medical school, but he had never been as passionate about medicine as I was. He was more interested in business and money. He worked as a hospital administrator, climbing the corporate ladder quickly. He was ambitious. He was charming. And he was deeply, deeply resentful of me. I didn't see it at first. I was too focused on my work. I was too focused on providing for my family. I thought Derek respected me. I thought he admired me. But I was wrong. The first sign of trouble came when Derek approached me with a business proposal. He wanted to expand the Brennan Medical Group. He wanted to merge with a larger corporation and create a national network of hospitals. He said it would make us rich beyond our dreams. He said it would secure our family's legacy forever. I told him no. I told him the Brennan Medical Group was a family business. It was built by my father and grandfather. It was built on the principle of patient care, not corporate profit. I told him I didn't want to merge with anyone. I told him I wanted to keep things the way they were. Derek didn't take it well. He argued with me. He yelled at me. He accused me of holding the family back. He said I was old and out of touch. He said I didn't understand modern medicine. I told him to leave my office and we would talk when he was calmer. That was the last civil conversation we ever had. A few months later, I started noticing strange things. Medical records being accessed without authorization. Patient files being altered. Money being moved out of the practice accounts and into private accounts I didn't recognize. I confronted my accountant, a man named Mark Sullivan who had worked for our family for 20 years. Mark Sullivan looked at the numbers and went pale. He said it looked like someone was laundering money through the practice. He said it looked like an inside job. I started investigating quietly. I couldn't believe Derek would do something like this. I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a hacker. Maybe it was someone else. But the evidence kept pointing back to Derek. He was using his administrative access to reroute funds. He was forging documents. He was stealing from his own family. I was devastated. I was angry. But I still loved my son. I still thought I could save him. I thought if I confronted him, he would confess and apologize, and we could fix things. I thought he would choose family over money. I was a fool. When I confronted Derek, he didn't apologize. He didn't confess. He looked me straight in the eye, and he blamed me. He said I had never supported him. He said I had always favored Melissa. He said I was a control freak and a dictator, and he was tired of living in my shadow. He said the Brennan Medical Group should have been his from the beginning. He said he was just taking what was rightfully his. I told him I would go to the police. I told him I would report the embezzlement. I told him he would go to prison. And then he smiled. He smiled in a way I had never seen before. He said, "Go ahead, Dad. Call the police. But while you're calling them, I'll be calling the medical board. I'll show them the photos of you stealing drugs from the hospital pharmacy. I'll show them the videos of you injecting patients without their consent. I'll show them everything." I was stunned. I had never stolen drugs. I had never injected patients without consent. None of that was true. But Derek was a brilliant forger. He had created fake documents, fake photos, fake videos. He had built a case that looked completely legitimate. And he had planted evidence in my office and in my car. He said, "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to resign from the Brennan Medical Group. You're going to transfer all your shares to me. You're going to sign a document giving me power of attorney over everything you own. And you're going to disappear. If you do that, I won't show the medical board my evidence. You can keep your license. You can keep your reputation. You can retire quietly. But if you fight me, I will destroy you. And I will destroy everything you've ever built. I was broken. I was humiliated. I had spent my entire life building a legacy, and my own son was taking it all away. I signed the documents. I transferred everything to him. I resigned from my own company. And then I walked out of my office and never came back. I didn't tell anyone the truth. I was too ashamed. I didn't tell Eleanor. I didn't tell Melissa. I just disappeared. I moved to a small town outside of Chicago. I took a job as a janitor at a local hospital. I changed my appearance. I changed my accent. I changed everything about myself. I wanted to disappear completely. I told Eleanor I was taking a break. I told her I needed some time to think. I said I would be back in a few months. But I never came back. She tried to call me. She tried to find me. But I blocked her calls and changed my phone number. I didn't want her to know what I had become. I didn't want her to see me as a failure. 2 years later, Eleanor died of a heart attack. I found out from a newspaper obituary. I wanted to go to the funeral. I wanted to say goodbye. But I couldn't. I was too ashamed. I stayed in my apartment, and I cried. I cried for hours. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. And then I went to work the next day and cleaned floors like nothing had happened. Melissa, my daughter, had no idea what happened. She had tried to find me too. She had hired private investigators. She had searched everywhere. But I was a ghost. I had changed everything about my identity. I had even changed my social security number using a network of contacts I had developed over the years. I was completely untraceable. But I never stopped watching. I kept track of Derek. I read about him in medical journals. I followed his career. I saw him get promoted. I saw him become a board member. I saw him sell the Brennan Medical Group for billions of dollars. I saw him become one of the richest men in the Midwest. And every time I read about him, I felt a little piece of my soul die. For 12 years, I mopped floors and emptied trash cans. I lived in a small, one-bedroom apartment with no furniture except a bed and a chair. I had no friends. I had no family. I had nothing. But I had one thing. I had the truth. And I had been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. The moment had finally arrived. Derek was now the CEO of this hospital. He was standing in the conference room with the board members. He was smiling. He was shaking hands. He was talking about his vision for the future of St. Catherine's. And no one in that room knew that I, Arthur Brennan, the janitor who had mopped these floors for 12 years, was the real heir to the Brennan Medical Group. No one knew that Derek had stolen everything from me. No one knew that he had ruined my life. But I was going to change that. I was going to tell everyone the truth. I was going to expose him for the liar and the fraud he really was. And I was going to get my revenge. But I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just walk into that conference room and start shouting accusations. No one would believe me. They would think I was a crazy old man. They would throw me out. They would call security. I needed to be patient. I needed to gather more evidence. I needed to build a case that was strong enough to destroy him. I spent the next 3 months working quietly. I went to the hospital archives and found old payroll records from my time as a surgeon. I found proof that I had been a practicing physician at the hospital. I found testimonies from nurses and residents who had worked with me. I found old medical journals with my name on the cover. I found my photo in old hospital newsletters. I found everything I needed to prove that Arthur the janitor was really Arthur Brennan the surgeon. But that wasn't enough. I also needed to prove that Derek had stolen from me. I needed evidence of his embezzlement. I needed documents showing that he had forged my signature. I needed to prove that he had threatened me. I needed to prove that he had lied to the medical board. I started digging. I went to the city archives and found property records. I found proof that Derek had transferred ownership of the Brennan Medical Group to himself using forged documents. I found financial records showing that he had moved millions of dollars out of the practice accounts and into offshore accounts. I found emails and internal memos that showed his plan to take over the company. And I found a recorded conversation between Derek and Mark Sullivan, the accountant, where they discussed the embezzlement in detail. I had everything. I had enough evidence to put him away for the rest of his life. But I didn't want to go to the police. Not yet. I wanted to expose him publicly. I wanted the world to know what he had done. I wanted the hospital board to know that their new CEO was a fraud. I wanted everyone to know that Arthur Brennan was still alive, and he was back. I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I contacted the best law firm in Chicago. I chose them because I knew they specialized in corporate fraud cases. I knew they had a reputation for being ruthless. I knew they would take my case seriously. I met with them in secret. The lawyer's name was Sarah Mitchell. She was in her early 40s, sharp, intelligent, and fearless. She had handled cases against some of the biggest corporations in the country. She had never lost a case. I showed her my evidence. She was stunned. She looked through the documents for over an hour. She read every email. She studied every financial record. She listened to the recorded conversations. When she was finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. She said, "Mr. Brennan, this is the most comprehensive case of corporate fraud I have ever seen. You have an airtight case. We can sue your son for hundreds of millions of dollars. We can have him criminally prosecuted. We can get your reputation back. We can get everything back." I nodded. I knew that already. But I had a better idea. I said, "I don't want to sue him privately. I don't want this to be a quiet settlement. I want to expose him publicly. I want the hospital board to know. I want the medical community to know. I want everyone to know what he did." Sarah Mitchell smiled. She said, "I can do that. But we need to be strategic. We need to present the evidence in a way that leaves no room for doubt. We need to make sure he can't weasel his way out of this." Sarah Mitchell and I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. We organized all the evidence into a clear, chronological timeline. We created presentations. We prepared witness statements. We contacted Mark Sullivan and secured his cooperation. He agreed to testify against Derek in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Mark Sullivan had been with our family for 20 years. He had helped Derek with the embezzlement, but he had also kept meticulous records of everything. He had kept them as insurance in case Derek ever tried to double-cross him. He had copies of every transaction. He had copies of every email. He had copies of everything. I also contacted former employees of the Brennan Medical Group. Many of them had been fired by Derek after I left. They were angry. They were bitter. They were willing to testify against him. I had a dozen witnesses ready to take the stand. Sarah Mitchell said, "We need to present this to the hospital board first. We need them to remove Derek from his position before we go to the police. If we go to the police first, Derek will have time to cover his tracks. We need to act fast." I agreed. I arranged a meeting with Richard Prescott. I didn't tell him the full details. I just told him I had important information about the new CEO. He agreed to meet with me privately. I showed up to his office on a Thursday afternoon. He looked at me with confusion. He asked me who I was. I told him my name was Arthur Brennan. He laughed. He said, "Arthur Brennan? The Arthur Brennan? The surgeon who disappeared years ago?" I said yes. I said I was very much alive. I said I was the janitor who had mopped his office floor for 12 years. I watched Richard Prescott's face go pale. I watched his hands start shaking. He looked at me like he had seen a ghost. I said, "I know what Derek did. I know he stole my company. I know he forged my signature. I know he threatened to destroy my reputation. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the offshore accounts. I know everything. And I have the evidence to prove it." Richard Prescott sat down heavily in his chair. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He said, "What do you want? What do you want from me?" I said, "I want to expose him. I want him to face justice. I want the world to know the truth. And I want you to help me." Richard Prescott was silent for a long moment. He was sweating. He looked like a man who was trapped. He knew that if this came out, he would be ruined too. He had approved Derek's appointment without proper vetting. He had helped Derek get the position. He was complicit. He said, "If this is true, if you really have evidence, I have to inform the board. I have to tell them about this. But I have to warn you, Arthur. Derek is powerful. He has connections everywhere. He will fight you. He will destroy you. He will do everything in his power to protect himself." I smiled. I said, "Let him try." Richard Prescott nodded slowly. He said, "I'll schedule a board meeting. I'll make sure everyone is there. I'll give you the opportunity to present your case." I thanked him and left his office. I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in 12 years. The wheels were finally in motion. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. All the board members were present. Derek was there, looking confident and arrogant, sitting at the head of the table. He had no idea what was about to happen. He had no idea that I was about to walk through that door and destroy everything he had built. I walked into the conference room at exactly 9 in the morning. I was wearing a clean white shirt and dark pants. I had shaved. I had trimmed my hair. I looked like a different person. I looked like the Arthur Brennan I used to be. The board members looked at me with confusion. They didn't recognize me. They saw an old man in a cheap suit, and they wondered why I was in their meeting. Derek looked at me with shock. He didn't recognize me at first, but then his eyes widened and his face went pale. He knew. He knew exactly who I was. I walked to the front of the room. I stood at the podium. I looked at Derek and I said, "Hello, son. It's been a long time." The room went silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Derek just stared at me with pure hatred in his eyes. I said, "I'm Arthur Brennan. I was a surgeon at this hospital for many years. I was the owner of the Brennan Medical Group, and I'm here today to tell you the truth about my son, Derek Brennan." I pulled out my evidence. I showed them the forged documents. I showed them the financial records. I showed them the recorded conversations. I showed them everything. I explained everything that had happened. I told them how Derek had stolen my company. I told them how he had threatened to destroy my reputation. I told them how he had driven me into hiding for 12 years. I told them how he had lied and cheated and stolen his way to the top. I said, 12 years ago, my son came to me with a plan. He wanted to merge our family company with a larger corporation. I said no. He didn't like that. So he started stealing from the company. He forged documents. He embezzled money. He threatened me. He told me he would destroy my reputation if I didn't give him everything. I paused and looked at the board members. They were all staring at me in shock. I said I was ashamed. I was humiliated. I walked away from everything. I changed my name. I changed my appearance. I took a job as a janitor at this very hospital. I worked here for 12 years. I cleaned floors. I emptied trash cans. No one knew who I was. No one knew what I had lost. I turned to Derek. He was pale. He was sweating. He was shaking. I said, "But now the truth is out, and you're going to pay for what you did." Derek stood up. He was furious. He said, "This is ridiculous. This is absurd. You have no proof. You have no case. You're just a bitter old man who can't let go of the past." I said, "I have more than proof, Derek. I have witnesses. I have Mark Sullivan. I have your old emails. I have everything." Mark Sullivan stepped forward. He was nervous. He was sweating. He said, "It's true. I helped Derek embezzle the money. I kept records of everything. I have copies of all the transactions. I have copies of all the emails. I can prove everything." Derek looked at Mark Sullivan with hatred. He said, "You traitor. You were my friend. You helped me. You were part of this." Mark Sullivan said, "I was. And I'm ashamed of it. But I'm not going to let you destroy this family anymore. I'm not going to let you destroy Arthur. He was a good man. He was a great surgeon. You destroyed his life. And now you're going to pay." The board members were silent. They were all looking at Derek with disgust. Richard Prescott stood up. He said, "Derek Brennan, I am removing you from your position as CEO of St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital, effective immediately. I am also ordering a full investigation into your conduct. If the allegations are true, you will face criminal charges." Derek started laughing. He laughed like a madman. He said, "You can't do this to me. I am the CEO. I am the one who saved this hospital. I am the one who brought in millions of dollars. Without me, this hospital would be nothing. You need me. You all need me." Richard Prescott said, "No, Derek. We don't need you. We need honest people. We need people we can trust. And you are neither." Derek's laugh turned into a sob. He fell to his knees. He started crying. He started begging. He said, "Dad, please. Please don't do this. Please don't destroy me. I'm your son. I'm your only son. I know I made a mistake. I know I was wrong. But please, please give me another chance. I'll do anything. I'll give everything back. I'll go to rehab. I'll get help. Just please don't ruin my life." I looked at my son. My only son. The boy I had raised. The boy I had loved. The boy I had trusted. And I felt nothing. No love. No pity. No forgiveness. 12 years of isolation. 12 years of shame. 12 years of burying myself in a mop closet, all because of this man. This liar. This thief. I said, "You're not my son. You're not a human being. You're a monster. And monsters don't get second chances." The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers walked into the conference room. They looked at Derek, who was still on his knees crying. The lead officer said, "Derek Brennan, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Derek looked up at the officer. He looked at me. He said, "Dad, please. Please don't let them take me. I'll do anything. I'll give everything back. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I turned away. I couldn't look at him anymore. The officers handcuffed Derek and led him out of the conference room. He was screaming and crying and begging. But it was too late. The damage was done. Everything was over. I walked out of that conference room. I walked through the hospital. I walked past the rooms where I had spent 12 years cleaning floors. I walked past the nurses I had worked with. I walked past the patients I had helped. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt free. The medical board reinstated my license. The Brennan Medical Group was restored to me. I hired lawyers to handle the legal details. I started rebuilding the company. I bought back the hospitals that Derek had sold. I rehired the doctors he had fired. I restored the family legacy. Melissa, my daughter, came to see me. She cried when she saw me. She hugged me. She told me she had never stopped looking for me. She told me she had always known there was something wrong with Derek. She told me she was so sorry for everything that had happened. I hugged her back. I told her it wasn't her fault. I told her I loved her. I told her I would never leave her again. I sold most of my shares in the Brennan Medical Group to a reputable healthcare company. I kept enough to live comfortably, but I gave the majority of the money to charity. I created a foundation for people who had been victims of family betrayal. I wanted to help other people who had gone through what I had gone through. I moved back to Chicago. I bought a small apartment in the city. I didn't want a big house anymore. I didn't want a fancy car. I didn't want any of the things I had wanted before. I just wanted peace. I just wanted to be happy. And I was happy. For the first time in a long time, I was actually happy. I spent time with Melissa. I reconnected with old friends. I started writing my memoirs. I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to warn other people about the dangers of family betrayal. I wanted to help people who had been victimized by their own families. Derek was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. He was also ordered to pay restitution of millions of dollars. He lost everything. His wife divorced him. His children wanted nothing to do with him. He was completely alone. And that was the most satisfying part of all. Richard Prescott resigned from the board. He publicly apologized for allowing Derek to become CEO without proper vetting. He admitted that he had been blinded by Derek's charm and ambition. He said he regretted his decision. He said he would work to restore the hospital's reputation. St. Catherine's Memorial Hospital continued to operate. The staff was relieved to learn that Derek had been a fraud. They were grateful that I had exposed him. They thanked me for saving their hospital. They held a ceremony in my honor. They gave me a plaque. They named a wing of the hospital after me. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that the best revenge isn't anger or hatred. The best revenge is living well. The best revenge is using your experience to help others. The best revenge is moving on and finding happiness. I spent 12 years hiding from the world, hiding from my past, hiding from my family. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of what I've become. And I'm proud of the legacy I've left behind. My story is a cautionary tale. It's a warning about the dangers of trusting too easily. It's a reminder that even the people you love most can betray you. But it's also a story of hope. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of a man who lost everything and found himself again. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, I want you to know that there is hope. There is always hope. No matter how dark things seem, no matter how broken you feel, there is always a way forward. You just have to be patient. You just have to be strong. And you just have to believe that justice will eventually come. I'll never forget the look on Derek's face when I walked into that conference room. I'll never forget the shock, the fear, the anger. He never saw it coming. He never expected Arthur the janitor to be Arthur Brennan the surgeon. He never expected me to fight back. But I did. And I won. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who has ever been wronged. It belongs to everyone who has ever been betrayed. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt invisible. I was invisible for 12 years. But I'm not invisible anymore. I'm Arthur Brennan. And I'm still standing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Family Dark Blames, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.